Hey Brickmaniacs, today we're taking a look at the Ka-52 Alligator, which as far as angry-looking helicopters go, pretty much takes the cake. This thing is fully loaded, and the double rotor just adds to that.
Yeah. This is a special design. This is so a little history lesson. The Soviet Union pretty much broke up in the 89 after the wall came down. 90s, early 90s, it broke up. All military development pretty much stopped.
Sure.
The Cold War was kind of coming to an end. And it didn't stop the Russians from needing a light gunship type helicopter, something that was comparable to the American Cobra, or the emerging Apache that was coming out. This was sort of in production. It was a Ka-50. It was a twin rotor. Basically there was a need for a small attack helicopter.
Sure.
There's a successor to the Mi-24. It's the Mil-28. Was put out by the company that made the Hind, the famous Hind.
Sure.
And then this was Kamov's. This was their entry. It was a single seater though. It was a Ka-52.
The 50? Okay.
Yeah.
enough.
So the Ka-50. This is the 52. The Ka-50 is the original version of this. Was the sort of the competing contender for this new gunship technology.
Okay.
But because of the lack of military money, the money for the military budget, the Soviet Union breaking up, there was less money in the coffers. It took a long time to develop these things. So this emerged really kind of late in the game. They did the single seater, came out. They made 50 of them, then realized that single seater it might be too much for
one guy to handle.
One guy. I mean, he could act. There's nothing saying they couldn't do it, but
sure.
You'd have so much more effective team to have a twin, a pilot and a weapons controller. So they worked on ways of making a tandem version of this.
Sure.
First, it was one seat in front of the other. Then they realized that they gained a lot of efficiency, cooperation, pilot. Weapons officer, weapons crewmen, cooperative efficiency by having them side by side. They can see what each other's doing. They can talk. They can talk face to face. So this is what they came up with. The Ka-52 was developed. It's basically the back half is the same helicopter as the original Ka-50. It was the crocodile. Well, actually, the crocodile is the Hind. So
alligator.
It was
crocodile.
a black shark. Yeah. This is the funny thing is you're seeing this video about. Almost 2 months after I did all the initial
it was designed.
research. Yeah, so I'm having to remember all these
Still
facts.
kind of funny to have one, even just in the same Russian helicopter family, to have a crocodile to alligator. Clearly, that's kind of some sort of trend.
Yeah. That was. I mean, the alligator is definitely taking that lineage of the Hind. The original Hind was actually a helicopter gunship with a big transport. It's a big helicopter.
Right.
And we wanted something. The idea was something a little bit smaller footprint, more agile, but still have the same sort of punch with the offensive weapons.
Well, and as far as weapons go, this thing definitely looks like it can back that punch.
It's built-in vampire wings. This is the original version. This would be the Ka-52. There's a Navy version with folding wings and folding rotors.
Cool.
It's a naval version, but this is not. Maybe next year we'll do.
Who knows? We'll see.
So I built this. The first step actually was building the rotor assembly.
Yeah.
So it is something that we had talked about doing. I think Yitzi had actually developed a contra-rotating rotors, which means contra-rotating means one blade is turning one way and one's turning the other on the same axis.
Right.
So it's not like the Chinook, which has two rotors that do rotate opposite of each other.
But they're on completely different ends of the helicopter.
Right. This is completely different. This is like two on the same axis. So basically one shaft, two props. And it does give a lot of advantage as far as efficiency,
stability, probably.
Yeah. So when you have a traditional helicopter has a rotor on the tail and a rotor in the front, and the tail rotor is only purpose is to keep the whole thing from spinning around because the blade would want to make the rotation of the blade would kind of force the helicopter around, and that little rotor in the back keeps it facing the direction you want to go. But it's at a penalty. You actually lose about 20 to 30% of your efficiency because you're having to divert power from the main rotor.
Because they're kind of fighting each other.
Well, they're fighting each other, but also you only have so many horsepower coming produced from your turbine engines. And if some of that horsepower is being diverted into just stability, then you're losing your lift, your forward mobility, all those things they're taking a penalty. So like the Apache, it's being penalized by having that tail rotor. But it also compensates by having gigantic engines. So,
Fair enough.
So here we have the same sort of situation here, but no energy is wasted. This thing is super maneuverable. It can do things that no other helicopter can do. It's not the only Kamov helicopter, the twin rotor. This was actually developed from a more utilitarian cargo version.
Oh wow!
So they took this design. It's a kind of famous Kamov design, and actually scaled it down a little bit, made it so it would be more friendly for an attack helicopter.
Right.
One other thing it also does, by putting all the power plant, the gearbox, everything right in the central part of the helicopter, you can knock the tail off this thing, and it's not going to like lose stability because
Oh,
the tail
sure, you
rotor
can
is
set it
suddenly
down.
missing. Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it makes for actually the sensitive parts of the helicopter, it's raw, compact, right in the middle. It's less vulnerable to like ground fire effects or any kind of missile strike or anything like that.
Yeah, and if it's not a direct hit, it's probably pretty survivable too.
Right.
Then. Oh, wow, nice.
So-
An excellent helicopter, and it looks sweet too. So you get that as an added bonus.
Right, and there's a lot of, a lot went into this helicopter. So when you train, you spend a lot of money training a pilot. And it's not just money, it's knowledge. That pilot is very valuable. It's probably arguably more valuable than the helicopter itself. So they did something unique in this and actually put ejection seats in it, which is not normal for a helicopter. Most helicopters, if you're going down with the helicopter. This has ejection seats, so I can show you.
I was going to say,
one of these.
how would an ejection through a double rotor work?
Well, it works very fast, actually. So if you look closely, you can see that pattern on top of those canopies. That's actually like an explosive cord that's it's cemented to the top of the canopy. So in an emergency, the pilot wants to punch out. Let me fix that. Pilot wants to punch out. Automatically sends a signal to the rotors. There's explosive bolts in the rotors. So almost simultaneously, the rotors will shear off.
And the cockpit will...
The glass on top will explode outward, and the pilot will be basically rocketed through. So the seat that the pilot sits on has two jets. The rocket's actually right behind him, and it'll just lift him right out through the top.
So he's gone from the danger zone like that.
Yeah, it's instant, and this thing can be on the ground. And that's the coolest thing about these modern ejection seats. They call it zero altitude, zero speed. It doesn't have to be off the ground. It could be on the ground. You could punch out and you'd survive. So
Okay.
it's just because of things that they've learned over the years.
Sure.
They've had goofy ejection seat arrangements where that ejection seat ejects you through the floor of the airplane, the aircraft. Of course, you don't want to be too close to the ground when it's ejected.
Yeah, that would be a huge bummer.
So there's a learning curve to this whole ejection seat technology, not just by the Russians, but everybody.
Yeah, right.
So we all learn from each other's mishaps and shortcomings.
And combat is definitely the best teacher.
and combat survivability is really important. So you can replace the helicopter a lot easier than you can replace a trained pilot.
People flying it, yeah. Okay, wow. Well, if that isn't some history that you wanted behind the Ka-52 Alligator, I don't know what is. What an incredible aircraft. Let's talk a little bit about the design of the model. You said that you started with the counter-rotating rotors.
Right.
Was it kind of one of those things where you're like, all right, if I can get this to work, then we'll build the helicopter?
We had talked about this. This had been something that the original Ka-50 was on our design. When we were doing Red October years ago, we were like, okay, we're going to do the Ka-50. It sort of timed out. We ran out of time to get it in on 1 year, so we're like, okay, we're going to put it for the next year. Yitzi developed a counter-rotating system. I didn't really get a good look at it, and it was really big. And I was like, this is going to be too big and too noticeable to use on for my purposes. So I spent a good amount of time trying to make my own design, racking my brain, miniaturizing. It was actually a camera guy who came up with gave me the final suggestion that put it over the top, and so it was.
Well, thank you, camera guy, because this thing is sweet.
So basically making the unit small enough to hide inside.
Right.
So it is a mechanical device in there, basically, that when you turn the rotors,
Look at
automatically
that.
makes you turn the top one, the bottom, and it would work vice versa, but you lose your fingers spinning the lower rotors. It's all mechanical. We could do other helicopters, all the other Kama family helicopters with this technology.
Sure.
Or counter-rotating props also on bombers and other aircraft.
Man, so much potential, but let's stick with this.
Right. We've been talking about doing the big Bear, the Tupolev Bear bomber, but there wasn't enough lead-up time. That would take me probably a month to develop.
Right, yeah. But the design team is pushed to the limits already.
Right, and we said, hey, let's do Red October again, in September. So it was very much like we didn't have time to do everything. So next year, maybe.
Yes,
Red
have a little
October
more time to plan
It's going to
ahead.
come around every year. We're going back to this.
Yes, the themes.
Monthly theme, and this is the first full. September was sort of de facto modern.
It was prep up. It was gear up for the themes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think a lot of people are really excited for the home front theme in December too. But that's a different conversation. Once again, we'll get back to the topic at hand here. So after getting the rotors, first of all, to the actual vehicle, how accurate is the design of the rotors?
This is pretty close. I mean, I simplified the whole mechanics because the blades do tilt. And,
Sure.
And they're actually, if you go look up, you can Google the Camelot design. Somebody had actually made a Technic version of it, of a working system where the blades actually tilt the way they're supposed to. So the whole way a helicopter works with the steering, it's actually the system of they can rotate the blades, the pitch of the blades to make the helicopter move forward or move sideways. And somebody's made that, but it's pretty massive. It would be for a completely different scale. That helicopter would be 3 times the size of this.
Yeah, sure.
So this is pretty good, but it's fixed. You can't. I mean, you can change the pitch, but you're changing it manually.
Right.
This is sort of the similar design that I've used for the other helicopters. So technically, you can make the blades fold up, even though this model doesn't. You know, in real life,
okay.
They don't fold up.
The Lego model does. The real one doesn't. So do with that what you will.
Right. I just used the same design I've used for all the other helicopters,
Right.
so we can make it forward compatible with the Navy version. So coming around if we do that.
Yeah.
So that was the main thing. Getting all of the wind. You know, there's so much going on in such a small location. Landing gear that can be retracted. The opening canopies and having the guys sit side by side in such a small space it's really tough. You have to have basically the arms in the right spot.
Yeah, right.
The doors won't close on this.
Not a lot of studs to work with.
They barely close the way it is, and when you put the guys in, it's still going to be like a tiny little gap. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that. It's just that their shoulders are too big. So. Someday we'll get some different pieces.
Yeah, right.
It comes down to getting the right pieces in the right color at the right time. So and we're kind of limited because transparent pieces are at a premium. There's just not that many available. Like not that many quantity wise, but the selection isn't wide.
Yeah, sure. There isn't a ton of parts made in that color. So still love the cockpit though. I love the functionality, and then I love the details. Some of the UV printing that we have going on in the cockpit for this, especially that trench clear.
I don't know if you can
slope.
see it through the.
I think camera guy will get it. Yeah,
Can you see
It kind of glows through there, but there's a trans green, neon green cheese slope, which is the heads-up display on the actual helicopter. It's right there. The pilot sits on the left. So in American helicopters, the pilot's on the right, and the co-pilot on the left, or whoever, whatever that station is. Pilot on the left, traditional aircraft arrangement, and he has a heads-up display, so he can actually fly the helicopter towards an object and be firing the missiles and guns, and it'll
because it's in
that.
front of his face.
So they do have that in-helmet targeting system, which is it's become kind of standard. The Russians were a little later to the game with this stuff because they had catch-up to do. What I told you before is probably a 10 or 15 year development gap, where they're either borrowing technology from other countries, like they actually contracted out to get some of this technology before they could develop their own. So,
it's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, well, why not?
Yeah, right. No, I agree.
There's so much going on in here. Let me just show you some of the. I could actually, while we're here, let's just put the landing gear up. So,
yeah, cool.
We do have this sort of sensor ball up front. They have, it's similar to the sensor, the weapon sensors.
Bigger, yeah, right.
So you have sensors, it's day and night vision and weapon, laser homing, all this kind of stuff. So we can push the landing gear up. They actually don't go all the way up in the real helicopter, so they do stick down on mine just like they would in the real thing. And it makes sense because if they were go all the way up, they'd basically be in the pilot's lap. So they have to do that. The rear landing gear. In order for me to make it, drop the weapon puck. In order for me to make it sturdy, I actually made it so you just pop them off.
Yeah, right. Slide them back.
And push them in. It works on the same on both sides. And in order to bring that pin back out, I put a little door, a little door at the bottom of the helicopter. See if I can get it open. Yeah. So you can actually push it back out should you close it and you want it to come back together. So.
Well, and I kind of like that because obviously there's something to be said for the difference between functional, smooth, folding back landing gear and landing gear that's solid and just kind of playable. And so you make that call as a designer of like, okay, I'm going to put it this way because then when somebody wants to swoosh it around without the landing gear up, it's going to stay there, look nice, and be in a solid spot. So I dig that decision.
So let me put this back so we can set it back down on the ground here.
But then the weapon loadouts too, and I know you've used similar patterns in this or build styles and other stuff as well. But when it's so crammed together on such a small looking helicopter, and then just the way it comes together with that nose, just a beast and a half. Obviously lots of printing. I can see even more of it still on the wings.
Right. So on the wing tips here, you have, this is like countermeasure pods. So you have flares. So basically flares to disrupt if a UV heat seeker, like A simple anti-aircraft rocket's going to have a seeker, infrared seeker. The flares will disrupt the ability of the seeker to target the helicopter. With modern infrared missiles,
Better have good flares.
It's a little questionable whether that's going to work, but not everybody in the world is using the state-of-the-art, Sidewinder heat-seeking missiles.
Right.
They might be something more primitive, therefore the flares will be more expensive or effective. Well, while this is off, I'll just actually show you. This is one of the weapon pods. If you have the hind, this will be a familiar pod because this was the same one that's on the hind. These are 80mm rockets. The one thing we did different on this one is printed the actual back.
Love that.
So they load these rocket pods from the back. They're 80mm unguided rockets. It's back to that sort of World War II. Aim your vehicle at the target, and they will launch one after another in quick succession. You see a lot of these. You can go onto YouTube and find them. You see them actually in Syria, where they're firing a lot of these weapons as part of the quelling of the insurrection against President Assad there. So that's actually something you can go Google and see real easy. These weapons
function.
Yep. So that was printed. These other missiles on here, basically defend themselves against other helicopters.
Right.
So it's the same. It's the same like as a shoulder-fired missile. It's just it's not a long-range thing. It's kind of point defense.
Which makes perfect sense because if a human can use it, why not put 4 of them on a helicopter?
Yeah. So they have a little pod. It has its own little sensor bay built into it. It does also have this 30mm cannon.
Oh yeah, hidden down on the side there. I forgot about that.
Right. Yeah. It's built into the side here, and it does have some limited mobility.
Oh, cool.
So when you're flying, you can shoot, but as you go over the target, it can continue to shoot.
Yeah,
you don't have
sure.
to keep tilting your helicopter with it as you overpass a target. So it does have the ability to move. It's a 30mm cannon. If you're familiar with the A10,
yeah, right.
That's also a 30mm. So it's a similar. It doesn't have that high rate of speed.
Yeah.
It is a pretty impressive weapon though. So that's pretty much the extent of the weapon system on here. There is a lot of sensors. This thing
printed sensors.
Right, over the years they've developed all these countermeasures and sensors for hunting the enemy and self-defense. So you have these sort of weapon sensors. They're infrared sensors. Those are actually sort of active anti-infrared defense unit. So it actually can point at, if you're being targeted by something, it can point at it.
They're your shields. Yeah, right.
So it's kind of cool. They rotate, they move. They're actually all located all over the aircraft, but there's 2 on the bottom that can actually point towards the weapons that are incoming.
Cool.
So you see sensors all over this. Another thing I should point out is there's a lot of printing on this thing. So
and some cross-element printing you can see right there on the tail.
Yeah, all of this is printed. This basically means Air Force of Russia. It says BBC, but that's not Russian. We're not talking about the British Broadcasting Corporation. This 45 on here is actually 4 printed pieces. So that's a first that we actually printed the numbers. So that is printed. Of course, the countermeasures are all printed. The canopies are printed. That people thought we put a sticker on there. That's not a sticker.
Nope.
There are stickers on this, and I should point out it's just the tail, the star on the tail, and the 45 on the tail. And the only reason we did those as stickers is because they're cross multiple plates
and sides. Right.
Yeah, and let's just keep it. A sticker's easy. We wanted to put additional stickers in.
Right, which anyway. I do like. I like having the printed 45, but then if you do kind of want to make something specific, you have the options in the sticker sheet.
Well, the idea would be that there's more than one unit that flies these things. They're located in different places, so they'll have the yellow would be a different unit altogether.
Right.
But if you wanted to have multiple aircraft of the same unit, we did some research and said, hey, these are actual numbers. Tail numbers that would be on aircraft. We didn't put the serial numbers on it. I think that was going a little bit too far.
Sure.
But that if you wanted to have like a squadron or 3, you could have 3 different ones, and the big numbers would go over the printed 45.
Right.
So they're color matched pretty good, and you could put 3 of them lined up, and it would look like a little air wings.
Yeah, I mean you can totally see that transfer back and forth there, camera guy, between how the sticker and the printed element looks. I mean that is super well matched.
They were remarkably
awesome.
well color matched.
And you can imagine how terrifying a group of 3 of these things would look, even just sitting on a shelf.
I think they usually go in pairs, but
sure,
that's the normal pattern of things. But.
Yeah, well, still very, very cool. Any other features you want to go over on this thing before we bring it in?
No, I mean that's it. The next big thing is, I mean, it does come with 2 completely new, updated. They're not completely new because they're very similar to the Hind guys.
But they do feature some new artwork. So without further ado, let's turn things over to Landon. Bring him in here to hear a little bit more about the 2-man crew that comes with the Ka-52 Alligator. All right, Landon's here, so let's take a closer look at the crew.
Yes. Well, where do we begin, man? 2 guys. Look pretty neat. Right?
Pretty similar, I would
Pretty
assume,
neat.
that their loadouts are pretty much the same.
Same loadout. Same. This is like a survival vest in that awesome Flora camo. One of my favorite camouflages. And then it's over sort of a flight suit here. We have a little pistol holster on there, some pouches, an assortment of pouches. Yeah, it's kind of like a standard sort of Russian pilot from this more modern era. You see helicopter pilots wearing a similar, or helicopter pilots obviously. You see jet pilots, very similar loadouts. I like the pocket on the back, assuming if someone's like sitting behind you, then something like a Hind, let's say. Maybe it's for like your co-pilot, like put snacks in there or something.
Sure.
That's my
You can
my
help
theory.
each other out a little bit.
my
Like, here's
theory.
some jerky, dude.
Little
Thanks.
shoulder pocket.
But now they're side by side. So.
A little bit of a lace-up system on the side and on the shoulders that we have simulated there with the artwork, because that's how artwork works.
Because that's how artwork works.
And that's the minifigure.
Very, very cool. Yeah, an excellent crew to go with. Well, I mean, what is a helicopter without its crew? It's not going to go very far.
Just sitting there.
That's for sure. So thanks for walking us through that, Landon. That's awesome. There you have it, the Designer Studio episode for the Ka-52 Alligator, designed by Dan Siskin. Make sure to tune in next time when we take another look at a different Brickmania kit.